Pee Wee liked to play with his Pee Wee. What can you say?
Welcome to Tairimo Boys podcast. I'm your host Cody. With me in second chair is the man who prefers several small adventures over one big adventure. It's Jeremy.
Even the little ones count.
With me in third chair is the man who's a renowned child's entertainer himself. It's Ryan.
What's going on?
Today, the Tairimo Boys are going to have a big adventure with Pee Wee's Big Adventure, the 1985 Pee Wee Herman film. You may know Pee Wee Herman as the child's entertainer, comedian, a guy who was playing with himself in the theaters.
Pee Wee liked to play with his Pee Wee. What can you say?
This movie is known for being a cult classic. A lot of people remember it from their childhoods, including me. I mostly remember the Large Marge scene and being scared like crazy from it and being traumatized.
I was also traumatized by this scene. In fact, my PTSD kicked in rewatching it today, so what's that tell you?
What about you, Ryan? Any trauma?
Yes, as a matter of fact, and we'll get to that in a little bit.
Okay, it appears this movie's very traumatizing to people. Alright, so let's get into it. Jeremy, what are your first thoughts?
I remember loving this as a child. Different story as an adult.
What about you, Ryan?
Nostalgic as hell because I used to watch the Pee Wee's Playhouse every Saturday morning.
There were times we watched it together.
Did we watch it?
It would have been after the whole theater scandal.
Really?
Yeah.
Why did we watch it after the theater scandal?
Because apparently it returned to syndication, or maybe there was VHS tapes. I remember us watching it together. It's like a brief memory.
Hey kids, Pee Wee's back in the news. Let's bring the series back.
No, but actually, funny story about that. So the whole theater thing, it happened. I think it was like 1 year after the show stopped running, and then back then we had a different type of cancel culture, where if a children's host got caught playing with their Pee-wee, then their show got removed from syndication. That's kind of what happened here. Show wrapped up, removed from syndication. But I've got a whole segment planned for the end of this review talking about all that. So, my first thoughts. Nostalgia is going to be a powerful force in this movie.
Absolutely.
I do have to say, whenever I was watching this movie, I was like early into the movie, and the first thing I thought, I was like, man, Jeremy and Ryan are gonna fucking hate me for making them watch this. And I also wanted to text my parents and be like, I can't believe I made you watch this movie all the time.
You saw it more than once when you were a kid?
Yeah.
When we were kids? I saw it once when I was
did
a kid.
too. I saw it more than once.
And that's when I remember the
watching
scene that traumatized me.
But here's the thing about the movie. The first 25 minutes, I feel like they're unbearable. Like, it's literally just a man-child running around, giggling like a maniac, and just doing, like, really stupid stuff. It's like a children's cartoon. Now, kids will definitely enjoy it. Adults, not so much. It's as soon as Pee-wee leaves on his road trip that the movie actually gets good. Would you guys agree with that?
100%.
Yeah.
Of course, like we've already mentioned, this is a children's movie. Jeremy, who did the musical score in this movie?
I do not know.
Ryan, do you know?
Danny. Oh, yeah, Danny Elfman.
Yep. Danny Elfman, of course, famous musician. Well, I don't know if he's a musician. He's famous for doing music in films. And Jeremy, do you know who directed this movie?
I also do not.
Ryan, want to steal the point from Jeremy?
Tim Burton.
Yes.
Lost us in the landslide.
Here's a pop quiz for both of you. Why do those two names mean so much to me?
Edward Scissorhands. The remake of Willy Wonka.
Yep. You got it.
Wait, did I really get it?
No. They did Batman.
Yeah, that was the serious. You blurted out the answer before I decided to get serious.
Yeah.
Poor Jeremy didn't even get a chance to answer.
No, not even a chance. I lost in a landslide this time.
But yeah, the reason I'm bringing this up is there were big names behind this movie. The reason I brought up these questions is because this is really Tim Burton's debut. I don't know if you'd say performance. It was his debut directing role, and there's like some scenes in this movie that just like ooze what we'd see from Tim Burton afterwards. Like especially all the dream scenes. You've got claymation dinosaurs. You got the large Marge scene with the claymation scary monster face, and I think it's the final dream scene where you've got all these clowns acting as like surgeons on Pee Wee's bike, and it just feels like straight Bat redirected Batman. There's no Joker here though. All right, so next question, Jeremy, what was your favorite scene?
Hmm. All right, I need a second to think about this.
Okay, well we'll pass it on to Ryan. Ryan, what was your favorite scene?
When I was 8, it was when he was riding the mechanical bull. When I was the age I am now, it was the credits.
Okay, no, I do have a favorite scene. The Warner Brothers chase scene. That was my favorite scene.
Yeah, I did like the chase scene. My biggest problem with that chase scene is one, there was no water tower. Two, there was no Animaniacs.
Oh, a cameo by the Animaniacs would have been great.
This was years before the Animaniacs existed. But yeah, there's like a huge chase scene with Pee Wee riding, trying to get away on his bike with to the Warner Brothers studio, and it just keeps like it. The chase scene just keeps escalating. By the end of it, you've got Santa's sleigh and Godzilla all chasing after Pee Wee along with security. It just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. It's actually pretty interesting that you get to see a perspective of what the studio actually looks like. At least I hope that's what the studio looked like back then, with just more sets. So, next question, Ryan, what was the traumatizing scene?
The traumatizing scene. So this was when I was a kid, and it was when he was about to get to a fight at the bar because I felt so bad for him. I was like, "You can't hurt Pee Wee. He's an innocent 5-year-old in a 40-year-old's body." So I felt bad for him. So I wouldn't watch that movie again just because of that scene.
It's not really much of a fight scene. It's
It's
just
not.
mostly gets thrown around and then does his little dance to tequila.
Yep.
The PTSD to this movie. Oh, the flashbacks. I do remember having this movie on VCR as a child and being so traumatized by Large Marge scene that me and my brother would rewind it and rewatch it. It was so terrifying and hilarious at the same time. You know, embrace the demons, I suppose.
Yeah, I remember sleeping one night in my parents' bed. We were all watching Pee Wee's Big Adventure. Whenever we got to the large Marge scene, I knew it was coming. Just hiding my face, trying to not see that. So, for anyone who doesn't know the scene, what happens is Pee Wee's stranded on the side of the road. Trucker lady comes and picks him up, named Large Marge. They're driving along, and she immediately starts getting creepy. Tells him about this person who drove their truck off of something, and they got all mangled up. And the way it's done is she's telling the story, telling the story, telling the stories, and then blurts out like, whenever they pulled the corpse out of the wreckage, just what it looked like, and then you see this claymation like really scary face that traumatizes kids, as I can attest to.
I as well.
But that scares the living shit out of Pee Wee. He's like, this is my stop. And then Marge's like, oh yeah, tell him Large Marge cinch. Yeah. And he goes in. It's like the typical like trucker bar. Everyone's eating. He's like, oh, Large Marge sent me. And everyone just stops what they're doing. It's like, yeah, she dead. Like you were driving with a ghost.
But she's that terrifies you even more as a child.
It's the well done claymation from Tim Burton that scares you as a kid.
Do you think there's like a deleted scene where Large Marge makes Pee Wee go down on her for a free ride? Like that scene in Ghostbusters where the ghost blows Ray.
I'd rather not think of that.
Ghostbusters. Sorry.
That seems traumatizing enough without even thinking about that. I've got adult trauma. Thank you, Ryan.
You're welcome.
But Anyways, there's really not much to the movie. The first 25 minutes are Pee Wee act like a man child, having fun. He's in like a prototype Pee Wee's playhouse. Apparently, he would move out of this house in like a year and move over to his playhouse. But we're introduced to a few characters. Dottie, who's like a bicycle cashier that likes him. Francis, he's like really he's the villain of this movie, but he's really not in it a whole lot. He's basically just a spoiled like fat rich kid that not even a rich kid, like a rich man child.
It'd be hilarious if it was the same Francis from Deadpool.
Would have lost a lot of weight. But Francis wants his bike, pays like some random thug to steal it. Then when the heat gets too high, sends it off to be destroyed. And that's when Pee Wee decides to go on his road trip. The road trip is basically him jumping. We're basically jumping scene to scene as Pee Wee encounters like wackier and wackier characters and scenarios. He's basically told by a psychic, which to make obvious is like she's fake, that his bicycle is in the basement of the Alamo. So he goes on a road trip to the Alamo.
Just because the fortune teller said so.
You gotta believe those psychics. Some people are into astrology or whatever it's called, and Pee Wee's into the crystal ball. So just a list of scenarios we find ourselves in. First one is he gets picked up for hitchhiking by an escaped convict named Mickey. He did the very dangerous thing of getting angry and using his knife to cut those tags off the mattresses that tell you not to under penalty of law.
Gives you a hard time.
Then when Mickey drops him off, get the large Marge scene, which I already explained. That goes over to over the diner where we meet Simone, who is she's just a waitress in there, but she has dreams of moving to Paris, and
Daddy.
I mean that's basically it. Moving to Paris.
And there's her character arc.
Yeah, everyone's just got like simple character arcs because it's just jumping from scene to scene. You just can't go too deep into it. But she has a boyfriend named Andy. Andy's like she asks like Pee Wee to watch the sunset with her and a dinosaur. Andy kind of thinks that they might have been screwing, so he's always chasing Pee Wee a few times in this movie. When he's chasing him, Pee Wee hops onto a train, meets a hobo named Johnny. Johnny's like loves singing. It quickly annoys Pee Wee, so he jumps off. And that's when we reach the Alamo. Now, I do want to break and say, like, I love the Alamo scene. Because, like, Pee Wee's trying to ask right away. Like, yeah, where's the basement to the Alamo? But, like, the tour guide just shuts him up. It's like, oh, like, we're going to save any questions for the end. So he's on, like, one of these typical tours where he's learning about, like, all this, like, really boring stuff about the Alamo. Like, that tortilla shells are made out of corn. Like, here's how they cooked. Like, it's not even the interesting stuff about the Alamo, like Davy Crockett shooting, like, the Mexican army. No, it's, like, all this boring colonial stuff. But, and then, of course, you got, like, the tour group. They're all engaged and hyper excited. Like, the kind of tour group you wouldn't want to be with in a situation like this. But we find out as soon as the tour ends, he finally gets a chance to ask, where's the basement? The lady lets him know. There's no basement to the Alamo. Everyone knows that. And you have Pee Wee just running off grumbling. He's like, yeah, they don't teach you that in school that there's no basement to the Alamo. That's when Pee Wee meets back up with Simone. She's decided to leave her job and Andy and go to Perry. Andy, of course, shows up, chases Pee Wee to a rodeo. We get to see Pee Wee, or at least a stunt double, right on a bull. That's the end of Andy, because after Pee Wee gets thrown off, the bull ends up chasing Andy away. And that's when we go to the biker bar. It's their bar, so they don't want people like Pee Wee in there. And of course, Pee Wee makes a stupid mistake of knocking over all their bikes. So he fights them. They're about to kill him. He asks for a last request, which is him dancing. They all have fun. Decide to spare him. And he ends up crashing the bike right away. We get a dream sequence, like I stated earlier. And we go to the Warner Brothers studio where he finds his bike and drives off with it. Chasing ensues. Eventually, we get the famous scene in this movie with the pet shop on fire. For anyone unaware of that scene, what happens is Pee Wee's successfully escaped from the Warner Brothers lot. He sees a pet shop on fire, and being Pee Wee's like, I need to save all the animals in there. So he's going in there, releasing all the animals. It's a constant joke going in and out. Is he keeps stopping in front of like a tank full of snakes? It's like, no, I'm not gonna do this. No, I'm not gonna do this. And then the scene ends with him running out of the pet shop screaming as he's holding like all the snakes.
And then passing out.
Wouldn't you with all the snakes?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Anyways, firefighters and the Warner Brothers people show up. Like, oh, he's a hero. Like, no, this guy's a criminal. But they decide, like, hey, the whole story you told us about your trip, that's movie gold. So we're gonna turn this into a movie. So we get to see it's turned into like some kind of James Bond parody movie where Pee Wee gets to play a minor role in the movie as like a bellhop, and they went and dubbed over Pee Wee's voice in it. But Pee Wee doesn't seem to mind. I do have to say, like, whenever they're showing this movie, it's like a movie premiere with at like a drive-in theater. Like, I absolutely love like the ending of this movie because it's got all the characters that he's met aside from Andy there, and just shows like, hey, everyone's like happy and they've accomplished the ones that had goals to accomplish, they accomplished them, and it's just a general feel good ending.
Brilliant scene.
Except for Ryan, whose favorite scene is the credits. But yeah, I mean, that's literally all there is to the movie. So, Jeremy, final thoughts.
This is a movie that I had not watched this movie in years, but it was nice to see it one more time. R.I.P. Wee. R.I.P. Wee.
Ryan, final thoughts.
It was appropriate for me to say this was fun 30 years ago.
Fair enough.
Cody, final thoughts.
Yeah, Ryan has it best. This is more of a movie for kids. If you watch as a kid, you'll get maybe a little bit of nostalgia. Like I said earlier, like the first 25 minutes of the movie where Pee Wee's just running around being a man child, it's like really cringe, and it really doesn't pick up for adults till you get to the road trip. At the very least, it got Tim Burton off the ground, and now we have so many great movies from him, like The Nightmare Before Christmas and Batman. But at the same time, we got like really bad movies from him, like that Willy Wonka movie. So if you're gonna see this, see it for the nostalgia. Let your kids watch it. It'll definitely be okay. I think it's probably back in syndication now that like 30 years have passed. So let's get to our final segment. I'm just gonna come out here and say this right now. Paul Rubin, who plays Pee Wee Herman, the guy's a fucking sex pest.
May
Indeed
he
was.
rest in peace.
R.I.P. Pee Wee.
He's visiting those shady movie theaters in the skies now.
Yeah, again, Pee Wee liked to play with his Pee Wees.
So, interesting facts about him. He was arrested 1 year before his famous arrest. He was arrested around this theater for like skulking around. And then, of course, and 1 year later, he's arrested for playing with himself in that theater. It's a
I
shame
didn't
this.
know.
Go ahead, Ryan.
I didn't know about the first arrest. Is that true?
Yeah,
He was skulking around the theater.
that theater, the exact same theater.
Is he looking for his bike?
I don't know. He was looking for something, all right. But if he had waited like another 30 years, he could have tugged himself off in the comfort of his own home to internet pornography.
Pee Wee
But
didn't have that luxury at that time.
the old cancel culture ended up getting him, and that was the end of Pee Wee's Playhouse from a lot of kids' lives. I remember as a kid, I was probably around 8, it's the late 90s. I asked my parents, like, whatever happened to Pee Wee Herman? My dad was like, yeah, they're not allowed to show that show anymore. And I kept asking why, and my dad goes, yeah, he was playing with himself. I go, what does that mean? And my mom's like, stop it. It's like he's playing with his dick. Like, what's the big deal? My mom just trying to shut this shit down.
Just can't do it in public.
And then Cody's parents canceled him.
That's enough of Cody's past stories about Pee Wee Herman. But in the early 2000s, Paul Rubin got arrested for child pornography. I'll give Paul Rubin credit. He was one of the few sex pests in Hollywood that wasn't putting his pee-wee in other people. Now, so here's the whole story about the whole child porn thing. He, of course, like I said, I believed that he's a fucking sex pest. He had a ton of like, he was given a ton of like vintage pornography. Apparently, there was maybe some teenagers in this, and he didn't know. But from what I've read, it looks like it was an overzealous prosecutor that went after him, trying to make a name for themselves. Guy really shouldn't have had the pornography, but really, he didn't know any better. But they played it no contest, and both sides kind of took that as a victory. If you're unaware of legal, that's kind of it's pleading like, yeah, I'm guilty, but the the legal system really doesn't want to deal with this. So both sides lose, both sides win. But I feel like that's total bullshit. But then again, he shouldn't have been a sex pest. And I will give him credit that he didn't touch anyone, he didn't assault anyone, so he gets a gold star for that. Anyways, thank you. Anyways, thank you for joining us for our children's movie review. So, Jeremy, this movie has a lot of slapstick in it. Some okay slapstick, didn't mention that. But on a scale of the Three Stooges to Ernest Goes to Africa, where would you rank this?
I have never seen Ernest Goes to Africa, so
Is that even a movie?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
are you serious?
Yeah, it's like one of the Ernest movies. It's considered the worst one.
Yeah.
Considered
Oh
the
shit,
worst.
it is.
Well,
Does he get blackface?
When I was researching this scale, you had the typical whiny journalist saying that this movie is very racist.
well, as I have not seen Ernest Goes to Africa, I would slap it in between.
I don't think you want to use the word slap in this particular podcast.
I'm choking on my coffee.
I don't think you want to use the word choke in this particular podcast.
Ryan, where do you want to rank it?
Well, let's see. What was the scale again?
Ryan, it's a very easy scale. It's a Three Stooges to Ernest Goes to
Oh,
Africa.
Three Stooges. I remember Ernest Goes to Africa. I don't remember the Three Stooges. I'll go right below the three. I'll put it right below the Three Stooges.
There you go.
I feel like we need another scale for this one.
I'm not making up another one on the spot. All right. Well, everyone, thanks for joining us, everyone, for our Big Adventure podcast. Don't forget to like, subscribe, leave a comment, tell us how much you like Ernest Goes to Africa. And don't forget to ring that motherfucking bell. Stay tuned for more episodes.